while many of us, we are busy concentrating on what is happening in Venezuela, there's something that has happened last night in Burkina Faso. And
It's barely 2026, and Burkina Faso is already hearing that word again. Coup. Not shouted, not announced, not confirmed, just whispered at first, sliding through phones, timelines, and late-night voice notes. For a country that has lived through sudden power shifts, the calendar almost feels irrelevant now. New year, same tension, no tanks on TV, no emergency address, just the familiar claim that something dangerous was stopped before daylight ever saw it. The target, they said, was the leadership itself. And once again, the story wasn't about what happened in public, but what almost happened in secret. In Burkina Faso, that distinction matters. Because coups here don't always arrive with noise anymore. Sometimes they arrive as rumors first, and by the time the truth catches up, the country has already reacted. So, what's really going on? By the time people started asking questions, the story was already moving faster than any official response could catch it. Early January 2026 had just settled in, and Burkina Faso was supposed to be exhaling into a new year. Instead, phones began buzzing with the same uneasy message. It almost happened again. Not a headline, not a press release. A claim, repeated quietly, insistently, that an attempted coup had been stopped before it reached daylight. The date attached to it was the 3rd of January. The tone was not dramatic, but confident, as if the speakers were sharing something already resolved. What made the message unsettling was its familiarity. Burkina Faso has learned to read between silences. In the past, coups didn't always announce themselves with gunfire first. Sometimes they revealed themselves afterward, when the damage was already done. This time, the narrative was inverted. According to the posts spreading locally, the danger never reached the streets. Security forces, they said, had intercepted a plot early, before troops could move, before announcements could be forced, before panic could spread. The implication was clear. This was not chaos narrowly survived, but control quietly asserted. The name that kept surfacing as the target was Ibrahim Traoré. The story did not describe a dramatic confrontation or a last stand. It described planning rooms exposed, connections traced, and arrests carried out without spectacle. In other words, it framed the coup as something that failed, not because it was weak, but because it was seen too early. That framing mattered. It suggested vigilance, intelligence dominance, and a state that was no longer reacting, but anticipating. What followed next was just as telling as the claim itself. There was no rush to deny it, no immediate attempt to clarify. Instead, the story filled the vacuum. The lack of official confirmation didn't slow it down. It gave it room to grow. In Burkina Faso's current climate, silence is not neutral. Silence is often interpreted as discretion, and discretion, in matters of security, is easily mistaken for proof. People didn't ask first whether the story was true. They asked what it meant. Was this another internal fracture? Another test of loyalty? Another sign that the power struggle had simply moved deeper underground? The year had barely turned, yet the language felt recycled. Destabilization, conspiracy, interception. 2026 was starting the same way previous years had ended, not with closure, but with tension. And that is what gave the story its weight. Not the absence of evidence, but the sense that it fit too neatly into an ongoing pattern. Burkina Faso was once again confronting the possibility that power was being challenged out of sight and that the public was hearing about it only because someone decided they should. So when people shared those messages, they weren't just passing information. They were reacting to a question that has haunted the country for years. Was this another coup that failed quietly, or just the beginning of something bigger still unfolding? It began to look less like the beginning of something new, and more like the exposure of something that had already been forming. According to the accounts circulating locally, this was not a spontaneous rupture or a last-minute gamble. It was an organized effort that had been unfolding quietly, out of public sight. The story being told was not about soldiers storming buildings, but about networks, conversations traced, contacts mapped, and plans intercepted before they crossed the point of no return. The coup, in this version, failed not because it lacked intent, but because it lost secrecy. What stood out in these narratives was the emphasis on who was involved. The posts hinted that the plot was not limited to uniformed actors alone. They spoke of facilitators, financiers, and civilian intermediaries, people whose power does not come from weapons but from access, money, and influence. The term economic operators appeared repeatedly, vague enough to protect identities but specific enough to suggest something deeper than a barracks revolt. The implication was uncomfortable, that any future takeover attempt would not announce itself with boots and rifles first, but with funding, logistics, and quiet coordination. Equally striking was how the arrests were described. Not as mass roundups, not as a show of force, but as targeted removals. Individuals are taken in discreetly, without spectacle, without explanation. This portrayal reinforced the idea that security forces had been watching for some time, waiting for confirmation rather than reacting to noise. The message embedded in these accounts was deliberate. The state was not caught off guard. It was already ahead. That framing changed how people interpreted the situation. If the coup had been loud and chaotic, it might have been dismissed as incompetence or desperation. But a coup described as methodical, hidden, and intercepted early carries a different weight. It suggests that power struggles are no longer playing out in the open. They are happening behind institutions, behind businesses, behind closed doors, where detection matters more than firepower. This is where the absence of official confirmation became almost irrelevant. The story's power did not come from documents or press briefings. It came from plausibility. In a country where previous destabilization efforts have involved external funding, internal divisions, and elite maneuvering, the idea of a quiet, civilian-linked plot did not feel exaggerated. It felt like an evolution. As more people absorbed this version of events, the focus shifted away from whether a coup had happened and toward how close it might have been. If arrests had already occurred, then the threat was not theoretical. It was already embedded within society. And that realization carries a different kind of fear, one that doesn't wait for confirmation, because waiting feels risky. Which raised the next question people began asking almost immediately. If this was really dismantled in silence, why did the response from the streets come so fast and so visibly? The streets moved faster than the institutions. That was the part that unsettled observers the most. Before any official clarification, before any denial or confirmation, people were already gathering. Not in chaos, not in panic, but with intent. Videos showed civilians assembling in public spaces, holding flags, chanting slogans of support, and making one thing unmistakably clear. Whoever had tried to interfere with the current order had already lost public ground. This wasn't a reaction to violence, it was a reaction to the idea of interference itself. What mattered here was timing. The demonstrations did not wait for proof, they followed the belief. The moment the story framed the alleged coup as an internal conspiracy quietly dismantled, a portion of the population responded as if a line had been crossed. The gatherings carried the tone of deterrence. They weren't asking questions. They were sending messages. Any attempt to reverse the current trajectory, whether successful or not, would not be treated as politics. It would be treated as a threat. This response revealed something important about how the political climate has shifted. Support for the leadership is no longer expressed only during speeches or anniversaries. It is expressed during moments of alleged danger. Showing up physically has become a form of political insurance. People don't wait to see who wins before choosing sides. They move early, so that the outcome has fewer options. There was also something notably absent from these gatherings: confusion. The crowd's behavior suggested that people already knew how to react. No one appeared to be asking what to do or where to go. This wasn't a spontaneous emotional surge. It looked rehearsed by experience. Years of instability have trained the public to read warning signs and respond collectively before events escalate. The demonstrations also shifted the balance of the narrative. Once people appeared in the streets, the story stopped being just about an alleged plot. It became about legitimacy. A coup attempt, whether real or rumored, suddenly had to confront visible resistance, not from the army, but from civilians. That alone changes the calculation for anyone considering future moves. Power is harder to seize when the public signals alignment before the contest even begins. Yet this raised a deeper tension. Public mobilization can stabilize a moment, but it can also narrow the space. When people take sides quickly, nuance disappears. silence becomes suspicious. Neutrality becomes interpreted as opposition. In that environment, the speed of reaction is rewarded more than accuracy. And once momentum builds, it is difficult to slow down, even if new information emerges later. This is why the response mattered beyond the alleged coup itself. It showed that Burkina Faso has entered a phase where the population does not wait to be instructed. The defense of the political order begins socially, not administratively, and that reality forces a difficult question into the open. When public loyalty activates before verification, does it protect stability, or does it lock the country into permanent alert mode? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. It protects stability in the short term, but it reshapes the system in ways that are hard to reverse. When public loyalty activates before verification, the state gains immediate insulation from disruption, but it also enters a condition of constant readiness. In this mode, politics stops being something that unfolds through debate or procedure and becomes something that must be defended continuously. That is the environment Burkina Faso is now operating in. What the reaction revealed is that legitimacy is no longer passive. It doesn't wait to be questioned. It moves first. Once people took to the streets in response to the alleged plot, they effectively closed the space in which uncertainty could exist. The message was not directed at institutions or foreign observers, it was directed inward. Anyone thinking of challenging the current order was being told that resistance would not start in offices or barracks. It would start in public squares. This changes the internal balance of power in subtle but significant ways. When threats are assumed rather than confirmed, vigilance becomes a permanent expectation. Security logic begins to spill beyond security institutions and into civilian life. Loyalty becomes visible. Silence becomes readable. In such an atmosphere, the line between prevention and suspicion grows thin. The system becomes very good at stopping disruptions, but less comfortable with ambiguity. There is also a psychological shift at work. When people repeatedly mobilize in response to alleged dangers, they internalize the idea that instability is always imminent. That belief can unify, but it can also exhaust. Every rumor feels heavy. Every pause feels intentional. Over time, this kind of political alertness stops feeling exceptional and starts feeling normal. And when an emergency becomes routine, it changes how both power and opposition are understood. Importantly, this doesn't require constant repression to function. The episode showed that social alignment itself can do much of the work. Once people demonstrate readiness to defend the system publicly, potential challengers face a higher cost even before making a move. The battlefield shifts from execution to anticipation, from action to perception. But this raises a critical tension for the future. A system that relies on speed and unity can suppress threats efficiently, but it also reduces the margin for error. If every warning is treated as real, mistakes carry consequences. If every silence is treated as a strategy, trust becomes fragile. Stability achieved through perpetual readiness may hold, but it does so by keeping everyone permanently on edge, which leads to the uncomfortable question now hovering beneath the surface of this episode: how long can a country remain stable when its political order must be defended at full speed all the time? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. It can last longer than expected, but not without changing the meaning of stability itself. When a country operates in permanent readiness, calm no longer means the absence of danger. It means danger is being managed quietly, constantly, and sometimes invisibly. That is where Burkina Faso now appears to be. The 2026 episode did not introduce a new crisis. It reinforced a governing logic that has already taken hold. Threats are assumed to exist, and power is organized around neutralizing them before they surface. In this framework, verification becomes secondary to control. What matters most is not whether every alleged plot is fully proven in public, but whether it is contained fast enough to prevent uncertainty from spreading. This is why the lack of official confirmation did not weaken the narrative. The system is not designed to pause and explain every move. It is designed to act, absorb reaction, and move forward. Stability here is measured by continuity, not transparency. But this comes at a cost that is easy to overlook at the moment. When the state and society operate on anticipation rather than evidence, the political space narrows. Events no longer need to happen to matter, they only need to be plausible. A rumor with the right shape can trigger real-world consequences. Arrests don't have to be explained immediately. Demonstrations don't need formal calls. The cycle feeds itself. Threat, response, alignment, silence, repeat. Over time, this produces a specific kind of political atmosphere, one where power feels solid but also brittle. Solid because it is defended from multiple directions at once. Brittle because it depends on constant alertness. Any slowdown risks being misread as weakness. Any attempt to relax is seen as an opening. Stability becomes something that must be performed continuously, not something that can rest. This also alters how future challenges are imagined. If power is always defended early, then opposition is pushed further underground. Contestation doesn't disappear. It becomes quieter, more indirect, more difficult to detect. That, in turn, reinforces the belief that threats are everywhere, even when nothing is visible. The system begins to justify itself through its own anxiety. The 2026 story, verified or not, fits neatly into this cycle. It didn't need a public climax to succeed. Its impact came from reinforcing existing assumptions. That attempts will continue, that vigilance is non-negotiable, and that alignment must be immediate. In that sense, the episode functioned less as an event and more as confirmation of how the country now operates. Which brings the story to its most difficult question yet. If stability now depends on constant anticipation of collapse, what happens when the anticipation itself becomes the source of tension? It becomes self-sustaining. When anticipation turns into tension, the system no longer needs an external shock to stay activated. It generates pressure from within. That is the final layer exposed by the 2026 episode. What began as unverified claims about a foiled coup evolved into something larger, a demonstration of how power, fear, loyalty, and speed now interact in Burkina Faso. The country did not just react to a possible threat. It rehearsed its response to the next one. In this environment, stability stops being a destination and becomes a process. It is maintained not by resolution, but by repetition. Each alleged plot, each intercepted plan, each rumor that spreads and triggers alignment reinforces the same lesson. Stay ready, stay unified, don't pause. Over time, this creates a political rhythm where calm feels unnatural and vigilance feels normal. The system learns to function best when it is slightly tense. This has consequences that unfold slowly. When anticipation becomes permanent, space for recalibration shrinks. Institutions adapt to speed rather than scrutiny. Society adapts to reaction rather than reflection. Decisions are judged less on accuracy and more on immediacy. The question stops being, "Is this true?" and becomes, "What happens if we hesitate?" That shift is subtle, but it reshapes everything, from governance to public trust. The alleged coup did not need confirmation to have an impact. It did not need names, documents, or trials to influence behavior. Its power came from timing and context. It arrived in a country already conditioned to expect disruption and already organized to respond instantly. In that sense, the episode did exactly what a real coup attempt would aim to do: test the system. And the system responded, not with chaos, but with consolidation. But consolidation carries its own risks. When power tightens around anticipation, it becomes harder to distinguish between genuine threats and imagined ones. Every alert reinforces the belief that danger is constant. Every mobilization confirms that response is mandatory. Over time, the line between protection and pressure begins to blur. People may still show up, but the reasons they show up can change, quietly, without announcement. None of this means collapse is inevitable. Systems like this can endure for long periods, especially when they are fueled by shared experience and collective memory. But endurance is not the same as ease. A country living in permanent readiness is always balanced between strength and strain. It is stable, but never relaxed. Alert, but never settled. And that leaves Burkina Faso facing the most important question of all, one that no rumor or interception can answer for it. Can a nation built on constant vigilance ever step out of survival mode without risking everything it has been trying to protect? Let us know in the comments section, why are they after Traoré? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.